Hi, my name's Lindsey. I'm a watercolour artist. In this video, I'm going to be talking through my steps on how I painted this barn owl. Grab your paints, let's have fun with this. If you've got any questions or if you came across something that you really struggled with, comment in the comments box below and also let me know what you think of this video. This is a new topic on my channel now, so I have completely switched my niche, so I would love to hear your thoughts on these tutorials. If you want to see any other of my tutorials as well, I'll link some of my tutorials that I've made down below for you. And if you want to better your techniques in watercolours, you want to learn more, you love painting tutorials, hit the red subscribe button. It is free and that just means that you won't miss any future videos from me. Also, if you hit the little bell in the corner, that means you'll get notified every time I post a new video, so you definitely won't miss any of my videos. I hope you enjoy this. Let's have fun together and let's get started. First, I'm taking some clean water and I'm evenly spreading that onto the owl's face. I'm making sure I've got no puddles here. Then I'm going to apply some grey, and I got a lovely grey by mixing ultramarine blue with burnt sienna, and I'm just painting a light wash of this in areas of the barn owl's face just to pinpoint the main dark areas of the face, so the shadows. Next, I'm applying some burnt sienna, and this is quite a diluted burnt sienna, so I'm taking that around the side of the owl's nose, also to the beak and a little bit around the eyes as well, just to pop a bit of colour into the owl's eye area. Next, I'm wetting the top area of the head. Again, I'm just using a small amount of water here. There's not too much water on my brush, and I'm smoothing that out so I don't get any puddles forming on my paper. I am very careful when I apply the water. I don't want to apply the water to areas of the owl where I don't want that colour to leak into, so I'm very careful. Next, I'm going to take some yellow ochre, and I'm using a dabbing motion to get those lovely spots and patches that a barn owl has. I love barn owls. I just think the patterns on the feathers are so beautiful. So I'm going to pop in some grey as well, and I'm just using that grey mix that I used with the ultramarine and the burnt sienna earlier on. I'm going to apply a little bit of violet onto the left hand side. I'm going to pop some yellow ochre into the wing as well. Next, I'm going to take a bit of that yellow ochre onto the body of the barn owl, and the paper is still wet, so I do want the paper to be wet so I can get nice soft edges. I don't want any harsh edges in this because I want to keep the feathers on the body nice and soft. I'm going to add some grey into those feathers as well, and with the yellow ochre still being wet, those two colours are going to sort of blend in together slightly, but you can still see the colours are separated. I'm taking some onto the back of the barn owl as well. I'm going to start painting in the eyes, so I've got some burnt umber here and I'm just applying a light wash of that. There's not too much water in my brush, so I can get a bit more control with where I'm applying this, because I find that when you're painting an animal's eyes, that really sort of makes that animal come alive. So I do like to take particular care when painting animals' eyes. I allowed that first layer to dry completely, and now I'm taking some clean water again. I'm going to apply that to the owl's body and also very carefully around the top and the sides of the head. I'm taking very light brush strokes with this because I don't want to disturb any of the paint that I've already put down. So use a very light pressure on your brush. Here I'm applying some violet and I'm taking a damp brush and just blending that out a little bit because the paper was a bit dry here. I'm also going to apply that colour underneath the face there, and you can see that the paper is wet, so that's blending out lovely and giving me nice soft edges. I'm also going to take some of that onto the body of the owl, just in areas really, just to pop a little bit of colour into the owl and make it look a little bit more different, a bit more interesting. I've also got some ultramarine violet here, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of that in there as well. I do like to use unusual colours that you wouldn't usually find in animals. I just think it makes it look really different and a little bit more unique. I'm dabbing in a bit more of that grey colour just to add a little bit of depth, a little bit of shadow and make it stand out a little bit. I'm also going to take some ultramarine blue onto certain areas of the owl because I just love the look of the blue, especially on top of the violet. I just think it looks really sort of interesting. Next, I'm using a negative painting method, and that is where you paint around areas to sort of leave those areas free. So I wanted to create some white feathers within the owl, so I'm just painting around and sort of creating a little feather shape. I'm not being completely realistic with this. I've got some diluted sepia on my brush now, and I'm just creating some sort of feather marks and just little flicks with my brush really, just to create some really interesting feather looking shapes. Like I said, I'm not being realistic with this. I do want it to be a little bit more loose, but I just thought I'd add some shading, a bit of a darker colour, just to add a bit of depth within the owl. I'm flicking some of that paint up onto the dry paper as well to create feather separations. Next, I've got some burnt sienna, and there's hardly any water mixed into this, so it is a bit more what's the word? It's a bit more, why can't I think of the word? I don't know if you know what the word is that I'm looking for. It's more strong. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, so I'm using the same colour just to pop some of that colour into the beak area as well. I'm giving it a lovely pointed end and sort of flicking that paint up to the eye area and around the eye area and around the sides of the beak as well, just to make it look a little bit more like feathers. I'm going to add some of that to the nose area of the beak as well, the top of the beak, and a little bit around the head. And then I'm taking a damp brush and I'm just going to blend that out to soften it out a little bit. I'm continuing to build up that colour, so just to add a little bit more depth, to add some shading, to make it look more of a 3D thing rather than a flat shape on the page. I'm also taking some of that around the bottom of the beak and then using a damp brush to blend that colour out. You do want to make sure that you're using only a damp brush though, because if you add too much water onto the paint, then that paint is going to sort of spread out and you're going to get nasty sort of cauliflower effects, which you don't want to be using really. Now I'm painting some clean water onto my owl and then I'm popping in some of that grey again. I've also got some ultramarine blue on my brush and I'm just popping that in as well. I'm just sort of going underneath where I popped that colour just to make it look a little bit more like feathers. I've got that grey mix again, but it does look slightly blue because the ultramarine, I must have just put a bit more ultramarine in it, so the ultramarine is a bit more prominent. I'm dabbing that onto the wet paper and you can see that it's blending out nicely. I'm also dabbing some of that onto the dry face of the owl, and that is going to give sort of a difference within the brush strokes and just make it look a little bit more interesting. I'm also adding some feather separations by bringing my brush up onto the dry paper. I've got a darker version of that grey now, so it's got not as much water mixed into it, so it's not as diluted. I'm taking some of that underneath the face of the owl just to create a lovely shadow. I'm also going to pop some of that colour onto the left hand side, but I've added a little bit of water to this so it's not as dark. And I'm just sort of using a kind of stippling motion with the point of my brush just to get these sort of uneven dots or marks. They're not completely circles. I'm using the side of my brush as well to sort of scribble and wiggle and just give lots of texture within the owl's feathers. I'm popping some of that colour onto the body and then underneath the neck as well. And this area is wet, so it's blending out nicely. I am using a damp brush just to blend that out a little bit further. And then I'm taking some violet. I love using violet within animals. I just think they look so gorgeous. And I also love using blue as well. Then I'm using my damp brush to blend that colour out a little bit. I've got the violet again and I'm just using that to deepen the colour a little bit. I don't know why I couldn't get my words out then. I'm just using this with slightly less water mixed into it, just it's a little bit darker. Then I'm going to take some burnt sienna and I'm going to apply that around the beak area just to give it more shadow and, like I said, just to add a bit of interest and make it look more like a real thing. I've got some lamp black now on my brush and there's not much water mixed into this. I do really want to get control when I'm painting this in. I am super careful, so I'm using a size 6 brush, and if you're if you're wondering what brush I'm using, this is a silver black velvet brush. I love these. They are rounded, they've got a lovely pointed end, so I can get real sort of fine details with these. I'm carefully painting in the pupil, so I'm being careful not to go too much over that brown area on the outside. And I am leaving a little space for a highlight because I want to use some gouache later on and add some highlight within the pupil. I've got some Payne's grey on my brush now and I'm using that on the dry paper. I'm just painting a little bit underneath the face just to create a nice shadow underneath the head. Next I've got some burnt sienna again and I'm just painting that onto the left hand side of the owl's nose, his beak, and also around the top of his eye as well. I'm darkening up the colour on the beak on the left hand side now. I've got some diluted sepia on my brush and I'm just making these little marks with the point of my brush. Then I've got some Payne's grey on my brush and there's not much water mixed into this, so it is quite dark. And then I'm just using the point of my brush to make these little irregular marks on the owl's head and down the side of the head as well. This is going to give the owl lots of interest and depth and just make it look quite realistic. I'm also going to pop a few of those marks onto the body as well. I'm using diluted violet here just to add a little bit of interest to the nose area and giving some little marks and some lines with my brush. And I'm taking some of that underneath the eye and also down the side of the beak and the nose area. Then I've got a damp brush and I'm just going to blend that out nicely so you don't get any harsh marks. I've got some white gouache now and there's only a little bit of water mixed into this, so it is quite opaque. And I'm just adding some detail to the pupils, so some highlights within the pupils. I've mixed in a little bit of water with this now and I'm adding some little hair flicks around the top and the bottom of the owl's eye. I'm also going to take some of that onto the nose as well, the nose area. And then underneath the chin area as well, just to create some little hairs and feathers. By adding highlights like this within your painting, you're really going to make your painting pop. And just adding the finishing touches. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to subscribe, like this video, and I'll see you in my next video. Have a lovely day. Bye.